Hello. I want to add or make some reflections on this year's EUROMEMO-Conference, which took place end of September. As usual, it's an annual event. End of September, usually we meet in different places to talk in a more or less open group with a small steering group about European economic developments and develop alternative options that do exist and that are necessary to engage in democratic economic processes. This year's general topic was, can the EU still be saved? The implications of a multi-speed Europe. And there's, of course, no better place to meet for such a topic than Athens. I always like, if I go there, to imagine this picture, the Acropolis, the highest polis, the highest city, where the gods and priests had been meeting, so to say, going down then to the forests. So the villages of the philosophers, of the economies, of the householders, and of the teachers. So it was a development down from the hills, if you want, down to earth, increasingly responsibility for human beings, for their own existence. And it was an integrated place in this way that it was at least not distinguishing between, in strict sense, between the economy here and the rest of society there. Much later, Marx, one could refer to him with the saying of, it's a society where nobody has one exclusive sphere of activity, but each can become accomplished in any branch he wishes. Society regulates the general production and thus makes it possible for me to do one thing today and another tomorrow, to hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, criticize after dinner, just as I have a mind without ever becoming hunter, fisherman, shepherd, or critic. Now, it would be completely wrong mistake us if we say this was a paradise already. It was definitely not. It was a highly exclusive society. In the extreme case, slaves, women, children did not exist as part of the society. Now, conventional wisdom suggests that this was the root, the foundation of Europe today, and it allows us to see the beauty, it encourages us to see the integrity, but it closes our eyes. It does not allow us that it was actually increasingly, as Europe, a society that was, to take the words from Maria Mies, based on abduction and rape. We all know, and it's not up to me here to repeat it, the story from the Greek mythology. Now, if we speak today of the refoundation of Europe, we have to first reflect, what do we really want to refound? What do we want to save when it comes to Europe? Any refoundation has to start with this question of the purpose, the objective, the spirit of what it wants to establish. Because even if it is a refoundation, it establishes something new, something that is appropriate to today's history. Now, basically, all this goes back to what was leading the Greek philosophers, the question, of what a good life is about. And it is a fundamental point in Europe, in a diverse Europe, that the ideas about such a good life, the decent way to achieve the means needed for this good life, had been very different. There had been many different reasons for this, but the question is, can we establish on this foundation, on this basis, a pluralist, diverse Europe? Looking at the current policies, we have to say it is a failed, by and large, a failed project. The fundamental issue is that the image, the purpose as such is not allowed to be diverse. Multi-speed Europe in actual fact means to enforce a one-directional Europe. There is only one direction, there is only one overall growth, and this had been made clear on different occasions. It is the most competitive market society in the global context. There are some issues that allow differences, but this was the main global orientation of this European Union. So it is probably fair enough to say that we cannot entirely be sure where we are going at this stage, because it is the aims, the purpose of this project that forces us to reflect where we want to go, and if we really have one goal and one clear concept about where we go. Macron recently, as well, end of September, launched this initiative for Europe, a sovereign, united, democratic Europe. It was as well end of September. And it is as such a very conservative expression of what he has in mind. And it means not least to say we want to maintain this overall global goal and want to change institutional aspects to guarantee that this policy can be maintained in the future. Yanis Varoufakis speaks in this context, or spoke in this context recently after the German elections about the Schäubleism. Wolfgang Schäuble may have left the finance ministry, but his policy of turning the Eurozone into an iron cage of austerity, that is the very antithesis of a democratic federation, this spirit lives on. And all this is, in a nutshell, about securing the established hegemony while the world is obviously still massively changing. And this is, I think, the decisive point that we have to take into account. The victory, that's the two main problems, or four main problems of this entire story, is of the change is the victory of global capitalism. It was a victory. It changed the global relationships, power relationships, but at the same time it created a setting that put itself, this global power relations under pressure. So we still have superpowers, we still have claims, we still have clear winners and losers, but at the same time, the overall setting is not clear. The so-called financial crisis is an important point in this development, and it shapes, of course, the development since, at this stage, about 10 years. But I think we have to see as well that it is much more than just a financial crisis. I refer to Keynes here. Speculators may do no harm as bubbles on the steady stream of enterprise, but the position is serious when enterprises becomes a bubble on a whirlpool of speculation. And then he continues, looking at the underlying rationale of Schäubleism. Enterprise only pretends to itself to be mainly actuated by the statements in its own prospectus, however candid and sincere. Only a little more than an expedition to the South Pole is it based on an exact calculation of benefits to come. Thus, if the animal spirits are dimmed and the spontaneous optimism falters, leaving us to depend on nothing but the mathematical expectations, enterprises will fade and die. So fears of loss may have a basis no more reasonable than hopes of profit had before. And the point that is important here, that Schäubleism is just denying any calculation, paradoxically arguing against his claims, and comes back to this annual spirits that only aim on profit, 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 maintaining the inequality of its distribution, maintaining the structural inequality that is based in the productive system.
Sono le 21:30.
And we may add, in this instance, micro and macro level are in the same spirit, caught in the same spirit. And then we have the change of productive forces that plays a major role today, digitization, the shifts in international trade, and so on and so forth. And of course we have demographic developments that play a huge role and are increasingly a challenge, not only in terms of global migration, but as well in terms of the huge centrifugal forces that lead to megacities and so on and so forth. To understand this, we have to, in terms of politics and policy making, we have to see as well that we face today a new generation coming up, looking for ways of coping with this situation, coping with these new challenges. It's a secular change, and this new generation comes that comes now to power. If we think about the age of Renzi or Macron, and so on and so forth, this new generations of policymakers has a completely different background of experience that shapes as well the images and the expectations of what is possible. I don't want to say that they have clear understanding or clear visions, but at least they have different visions than our generation had and than the generation of the war and post-war generation had. In terms of sociology, of thinking about society, I just want to point on 3 points that are shaping or leading these visions. That is, for instance, a book written recently, published recently by Michael Opielka about social sustainability, and he speaks of the internalization society. And then we have, with Stefan Lessenich, the other extreme of a society that is externalizing and living on the cost of others. And then we have, in a way, a middle way, if you want, or a subjectivized way of looking at lifestyles, of modes of life that have to be changed and that have different positions in society. There I referred to a book by Ulrich Brandt and Markus Wissen the imperial mode of life. So we have to think about current economic changes in this wider context. And this means as well that we have to think about austerity policies as part of this new thinking about lifestyles, life patterns, and modes of life. Not only a matter of social security and social provision, but going much further in terms of power distribution and the definition of responsibility. I think what all this shows is that we have to take up the challenges as a matter of bringing together accumulation regime. I refer to the French theory of regulation again. Accumulation regime and mode of regulation. And at the same time, linked to this, the life regime or living regime and the mode of life. This is important, I think, to have the different levels of the more or less strictly economically defined mode of production, then the way of legal and institutional ways of regulating the system, and furthermore, the same individually and socially defined regimes and modes, how people cope with it. The important thing we have to recognize is that we have to go beyond, I think, many aspects that are as well taken up by so-called heterodox economics. It is not just about re-establishing political economy. It is much further, and it is about what we said a long time ago, that the personal is political and the political is personal. A message from the 60s, student movement, women's movement, that we say we have to really take lifestyles as part of the entire political economic setting, not being influenced, simply being forced upon people, but being part of their own will and of the options they have. Now, this means as well, to come back to the definition or to the need of defining what actually a democratic federation, as Yanis Varoufakis said or claimed, what this can be about, how we can define such a federalist option. The main challenges, if crisis means opportunities, the main challenges are usually referred to as employment, immigration, digitization, and network industries. This stands against the traditional patterns of lifelong full-time employment with normal working days, of national citizens with firmly excluding non-nationals, with some exceptions, of course. It is standing against the mechanical and assembly line work, and it is standing against the enterprise-centered employment. So what we have in the future, or what we may have in the future, is an orientation on work as meaningful activity, not simply as a matter of employment, that we have to talk not of immigration, but about global migration or migration. Instead of seeing the digitization as a matter as a danger, we have to see the relief function of it, the potential relief function of it on a global level. And network industries means at least that we have the potential of cooperation. Something we always said should be actually the purpose of any kind of economic activity. In this context, and I think this is for us as economists a major problem, we have to think about democracy as well in a new way. There is a danger, and we see this when it comes to political discussion, when it comes to populism, there is the danger, or there are two dangers. The one is the danger of majority rule. It's a matter of size. And the other is a matter of scope, namely the talk about governance and open structures, where we don't know exactly what is behind it, or where we actually know what is behind it, and this is the emergence of personal relationships, of closed networks, and what I called once new princedoms. Divergence, multi-speed Europe can be seen as a transferred stipulation of old patterns of the regional and local divisions of labor. We have had this in the different countries. We have had specialized areas where people only produced, for instance, the bread basket or the corn fields in the pre-1930s Germany. This is still going on a national level, but it's now going more and more to the supranational level within the European Union, and this is part of the problem that some countries, some nations are systematically kept at the periphery or even pushed towards the periphery by this kind of specialization. It is going hand in hand, the two issues of industrial development and distribution of wealth. So, of course, there is first and foremost the challenge to translate this immediately into legislation, and these are huge challenges we face today just to make sure that people can survive. Employment law, labor law, social insurance and social provisions are under fundamental challenges, and of course, not being able to properly deal with it is a major danger as well for any political system, that people see that the system is not able to keep its promises, and this means that they easily shift to other areas, to other political, to populist forces. Another danger of dealing with these specific legislative challenges is that it easily distracts from certain more fundamental issues when it comes to economic development. For instance, discussed as degrowth or alternative growth. For instance, the complexity and integrity of production, as understood as manufacturing, as consumption, productive consumption, distribution, and exchange. It is a unit, and we have to face currently, especially the shifts between the different areas. It is basically, and this is what we frequently forget, all about the production of control of life. Every good, every commodity is part of how we deal with life, how we control our own life. And it is, of course, then a question of use value. We have to redefine permanently, we are permanently redefining what the use value is. And if the use value is a matter of simply using a thing, or if it is as well the use value of social settings we produce as well. What we have to accept that all this cannot be solved in the strict sense that there is always an ambiguity going on, going hand in hand with it, and it is increasing as much as we, or as long as we are dealing with long chains of interactions, as we do. Norbert Elias pointed this out in sociological terms, and it is a matter of value chains on the one hand and poverty chains on the other hand. The poverty chains coming up in more or less recent times, making us aware that it is not only about adding value, but it is as well about shifting poverty from one region to the other. Now, from here I want to return briefly to the political questions, to the two major issues of democracy. On the one hand, and this had been issued by Plato being here, and it had been issued by the Federalists in the United States when it came to the Constitution, the first Constitution. Madison wrote in one of the papers, "The Union is safeguard against domestic faction and insurrection. The smaller the society, the fewer probably will be the distinct parties and interests composing it. The fewer the distinct parties and interests, the more frequently will a majority be found of the same party, and the smaller the number of individuals composing the majority, and the smaller the compass within which they are placed, the more easily will they concert and execute their plans of oppression." So it goes on in this way, and saying basically that it is the most effective way of dealing with small numbers. And the idea expressed there in terms of, or as a matter of federalism, is then when he continues, the influence of factious leaders may kindle a flame within their particular states, but will be unable to spread a general conflagration through the other states. He goes on, speaks about religious sects, and he speaks as well about rage for paper money. I think this is important today, that we really figure out ways and think about ways, not simply about rejecting multi-speed or rejecting multi-directional issues, but that we work out plans that explicitly accept this diversity and in a way create productive conflicts. Of course, then as well providing the means of dealing with these conflicts. And there is another one point that is important here. It is the question of the expectations we have. I think this is a major challenge as well. Employment policy, industrial policies, all these single issues are overloaded, overburdened with the expectations. Employment will solve everything. We know this from European history. Work, work, work was, I think, in the end of the 1990s, the slogan. Anyway, don't want to go into detail here. The point is that as well we have this conflict, this ongoing conflict. On the one hand, it is about the European Union as saver. The European Union should solve all the problems, or on the other hand, now re-emerging nationalism, regionalism is seen as a matter of solving all problems on this other level. The ambiguity of this had been expressed by Winston Churchill in a speech in November 1947, of course, in a different context. The core sentence is well known. Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except all those other forms that have been tried from time to time. And what he refers to is actually that there is always this question of finding a perfect solution by one solution fits all. We have one ideal concept. Of course, what Churchill referred to is highly ambiguous as well. Let the people decide, and the problem, I think, where he is, or where his statement, the entire sentence, is valuable, is that it is not about finding a master plan, but that it is about finding ways of allowing different purposes. This is the major issue for political and for the economic systems. And there, I think, coming to economics now and coming to what I'm doing currently at the Max Planck Institute, is something to think more about the opportunities we have with the new technological forms, and to think as well about the legal challenges of redefining property, redefining control, redefining social security, not in the traditional way, not in the way of conventional wisdom, but in a more radical way, to secure that we have the different purposes, the different ideas of what a good life is, but as well the different ideas about how we can arrive at the means, how we can maintain the means or achieve the means we need for this kind of good life in the different settings, and at the same time guaranteeing on the European level, but as well on the global level, that we have, or that we overcome, the huge disparities. And we should definitely not allow any country or any region to take over the lead. This is saying this now in both terms, just returning from China and now living after over 20 years again in Germany. There is no right for Germany, there is no right from Europe or from any other region to claim superiority. And it is not only a question of a political question, but it is as well a question that any such claim can only, by definition, lead to a situation that systematically creates and maintains those tensions that are currently nearly impossible for us to be solved. There is no end of history, but we should really take it as a beginning of a new history. Thank you.